Hey YouTube, I'm back again with a second video to update you guys on some of the mods and installs that I've done since my first. I got a lot of love in the comments on the first video that I made. And so since then I've had a couple of minor and some major upgrades that were pretty involving. Before I get into some of the new additions, I just want to say, if you noticed from my first video, I mentioned that I did all of the installs and modifications myself. That required a lot of research online, a couple trial and errors, and some things that I just sort of had to wing, and it ended up working in my favor. This time around, there was one installation that I'll talk about as we get into it, that I did actually have to take it to the dealership for, Indian here in Connecticut. I'm not gonna mention the dealership because it was a little bit of a headache of an experience. They ended up losing one of my parts, kind of insinuating that I hadn't brought it to them in the first place, which was super unprofessional and annoying. And on top of that, when they did the install, they actually also knocked out one of the lenses to my brake light here. But luckily I called Joker Machine, the customer service there is great. I ended up being able to actually get the LED itself without the housing, which was way cheaper than it would have otherwise been. And I just reinstalled them. Here we go. So I say that to say that if you can do all of the installs yourself, I'll touch on what happened that I had to take into the dealership this time around. I just didn't have the tools. Because of the system, it requires special computers and everything, I wasn't able to do it. So I didn't have a choice, and I would still have to do it again if I had to do it all over again. But for those of you who are looking to do any sort of modifications that can be done at home, I recommend you guys get on YouTube, look online like I did, and you may end up saving yourself a ton of headaches that I was able to avoid until this one time. So that's it. Now let me get into it. So first, I'll mention the last time around, if you guys remember, I had two saddlebags from LongRide. I ended up switching out one of them here on the right for a tool roll. It still is Leatherman. It's the same khaki, so it still does match. I'm not sure if you can see, but you can see in the first video. Sorry, it's a little tight. I swapped it out because 2 bags is a little bit overkill for what I found myself traveling with. And I would much prefer to have the tool roll for emergencies if I needed. But if for whatever reason on a particular day, I'm packing a little bit heavier, I still have the other saddlebag as well as a matching backpack from LongRide. Check them out. These things are not cheap, but the quality, you can feel it as you hold them. And when you're using them, it's amazing. I did have 1 or 2 comments in the last video saying, if a bobber is meant to be simple and sleek and not meant for saddlebags, which I agree with, but I don't plan on getting a bagger anytime soon. As you can see, I got this bag girl in the house right now, which is not realistic. To have 2 motorcycles in the house, especially a bagger. But next season, I will be looking into that possibility, probably staying in the Indian family. Until then, a couple things. One, I don't think it's ugly. I think these are gorgeous, especially the ones from LongRide. But 2, instead of not just taking them down as it was requested in the comments, I ended up doubling down and actually bringing the leather to the front as well. So if you notice, in the last video, I had some German hand grips that were really nice, kind of sporty. I ended up swapping them out to continue the leather theme in the front. I put the stock leather, the stock grips back on, and I ended up wrapping them in tobacco brown leather from Trip Machine. Which is, they had great products online on Amazon. You can find on the website. And I dyed it so that it would match the brown here on the back. And it fits better with the look that I think I went for. It also, with the stock grips, because of how thick and rubbery they are, and then the added leather wraps around it, it does a much better job of actually dampening the vibrations of the road when you're on the highway for long periods of time. But I further went with the theme by doing the same thing with the crash guards. I again leather wrap from trip machine, and I dyed it to this chocolate, I believe it's called chocolate brown. I bought this dye from Amazon called Fiebing's leather dye, and it worked out great. So that's one of the minor ones. Since on top of that, one of the things that I did, or really this is the, well, before I get into that, one of the other minor things was, if you guys remember, the sissy bar from Ginz choppers. I loved it. Just for another shot for those of you who maybe haven't seen the first video. I asked for this at the time, a year ago. I asked for a Dreamcatcher insert to be put in. Now, they didn't at the time have this insert actually on their website. I ended up seeing it in one of their photos that somebody had put online. And so I had to call to ask if they actually had them in stock, and they did. So because I was getting this inserted and to allow for extra clearance here, I had to call and make sure that I was getting the smallest, the shortest sissy bar possible, because I didn't want anything too massive, that would still allow for this clearance to be here. And they ended up giving me a custom size that they didn't originally have listed online. Anyway, because this was a custom size that I had to call and custom order, I also had to do the same for this cushion. So I called them up again. They had my account on their computer system, of course. And they ended up custom fitting this for me based on my previous order. And the good thing about this is that you can sort of put it on, take it on and off as needed. I left it on just for now while it's tucked away for the season. But when I'm riding solo, I take it off. I put it back on if I have my daughter, for that extra sense of safety, but also comfort. She loves it. It's been great. And because I can take it on and off, it's super convenient. One of the questions that I had from the last video, someone asked me to talk about it a little bit more specifically, asking about whether or not this was permanently mounted to the frame, to the stock frame, or what I had to do to sort of get it on there. This can come on and off as needed as well. So there's there's a massive bolt under here. You just get that out, pull out the sissy bar, or you can take the entire frame itself. This is their rigid mount, which is bolted onto in the holes that are already in the stock little frame that's already here for the rear fender. So the rear fender, the stock fender stays on. The rigid plate that Ginz sells, which is separate from the mount itself, you have to buy both pieces. That gets bolted on, and then you can bolt on the sissy bar. But the pattern's been a great addition. Now, here go the couple of major changes that I made, and this is where I'll sort of talk about why I had to take it into the dealership. My lovely wife bought me these gorgeous Roland Sands design foot mounts. So these make it so that where, as you can see, where the original front mounts, the forward mounts are for the Scout Bobber, these actually get pushed back to like the mid-mount position. And because, as I mentioned in the first video, I got this drag bar, the seating position's even more aggressive than stock, and I'm sort of leaning forward. So what it did was it made it very uncomfortable with having my feet all the way pushed forward and my back leaned forward like that. So despite the fact that I got this gorgeous Corbin seat, these great shocks that I installed, the front shocks that I put in, that helped with a more comfortable ride on the highway. But that lean forward really was a bad setup. And with these mid mounts, it brings your feet back a little bit. You're closer to like a sport riding position, and it takes a huge load off your back. The problem is that because you're moving this back from here to there by about a foot, you need some extra brake line, because you end up tying linking the brake line to the horn and then putting an extension brake line to the rear. So because that happens, you have to bleed the brakes. And when it comes to the ABS brake system with Indian, you can't bleed it in the traditional sense, or at least according to anything that I found online. There needs to be this computer that sort of helps to force the brake fluid through the line, because the ABS computer system on the Scout itself ends up bogging down. I don't really know the terminology, but because that was the case, and I don't want to install a faulty brake line, I took it in. I took it in really just to bleed the brakes. I ended up putting on the mid mounts myself, both on the right and the left. But then I drove basically with no front brakes to the dealership for them to, with brake fluid, with the necessary extension pieces and everything, for them to bleed them out and then just keep me going. And that's where the problems arose that I mentioned in the beginning of the video. So I won't talk about it again. But because, this might be a little tight because of where the bike is. Because I ended up moving the mounts from the front to the current position, if you can see, let's see, where are we? If you can see where the belt guard is, the stock belt guard was too bulky to where the bolts for the new mount go. It conflicted. There was no clearance. So I ended up having to take the front belt guard off. So I ended up getting the Roland Sands front belt guard. And just to match it, I ended up doing the same with the rear, just to make sure that they matched, which was fun. And I installed that as well before I took it to the dealership. The rear one was much trickier because you do have to loosen up the belt itself. To do that, you have to undo the rear tire bolt and everything that keeps it together, and you have to push it forward so that the belt got loosened up, so then you can access the bolts that kept the rear belt guard in place. And then I had to put the new one back on. And like I said, I do recommend you guys do your research, because I did end up having to make sure that I bought the proper tools. Obviously, I already had the bike lift from when I installed the front and rear shocks, but I ended up having to use it again to loosen the tire. I also had to get this belt tension gauge to make sure that I had the tire in the correct position that made just the right amount of tension on the belt itself. I did it all right, man, until the dealership kind of stung me on that. But because I was taking it to the dealership, and because they were already going to be working on the brake lines, I also figured, well, hell, why not replace the stock tires, which I did as well. I bought these, here we go, Michelin Commander 3s. These are awesome tires. I had them put on. They're supposed to be really good in rain weather, which, I've been in a light sprinkle, but I haven't really put these to the test. Hopefully I don't really have to, but they ride great. And for anybody who has a bobber knows that the stock rear tire ends up balding out pretty quickly. And mine was getting there. So I took the liberty of, I'm gonna take it in for the brake bleed. Why not swap out the tires? And so that's what I did, put some new shoes on this girl. And that's it. So with the mid controls, which by the way, those are super, super expensive. Thankfully, my wife got them for me for Father's Day, but the comfort is insane. So we got the mid foot mounts. I got the cushion for the sissy bar, the new tires, the tool roll, wrapping the grips, and the crash guards, and then the belt guards that I put up to adjust for the foot controls. That's it, man. And this is the final product of my girl. I know I said the first time around in the initial video that I don't see myself really doing any new additions. And I can honestly say I mean that at this point. There's absolutely nothing else that I want to do for my bike. So come next season, before then, you know, just an oil change, and then get straight to riding. This is the final product. I'm super happy, and I feel like I've answered most of the questions that came through in the first video. But like I said, if you guys have any questions, hit me up. I was happy to help with another YouTube member who ended up having a question about the original foot extension or reduction piece that I had on, and I ended up just selling them to her since I ended up putting the mid mounts on. But I've answered questions along the way as well. I appreciate the comments and the compliments. Let me know what you think about these foot mounts. Let me know if you've installed anything else. I did look at Kuryakin, which sells a mid mount for the Indian Scout, but for whatever reason, they don't fit the bobber themselves, but it would have been a much cheaper option. So I'm curious to hear if anybody was able to figure that out and get that done, or if anybody else has these and maybe you know, loves them as much as I do or regretted them. But other than that, if you have any questions, you guys let me know, and you guys stay safe, stay on two wheels. See you in the spring.